presentation today is on improving the airport journey from an end-to-end point of view with biometrics. What really want to focus on today are the key questions that the industry should be asking to properly enable their passengers' end-to-end journey. Discussions about this have been around in terms at a high level, but there are some more detailed questions that should be asked to make sure that the stakeholders are choosing, the best process for them. The question is, well, where can biometrics help in aviation? Quite a bit. Biometrics has been in aviation for a while. It's actually been part of typical inbound processes in terms of automated border control for a good 5 to 10 years. However, with advances in technologies, it can be significantly expanded within the airport. Biometrics can help basically at passenger agent-facing check-in, self-bag drop, ticket presentation and pre-security, duty-free and airline lounge access. A number of times for travelers, you go and buy duty-free, and up at the register, you're fumbling around trying to look for your boarding pass to be logged in, and it kind of slows the whole process up. It can be automated boarding, as we said, border control, both in immigration and outbound, and then on board and off airport. The biometric journey, which allows the automation of passenger processing to verify identity, it provides benefits for many stakeholders. It improves the customer experience. We believe that roughly 80% of the traveling public would like to have a seamless automated journey through the airport, where the other 20% either chooses to or needs more of a face-to-face customer service experience. What happens today is that in the current processes, you will have one of those 20% who either chooses or needs to have that face-to-face experience working with an airline agent or an airport agent, and those passengers who prefer a more seamless journey are in line behind them. This basically allows, this biometrics journey allows those passengers who choose the seamless journey to go through one process, and the passengers who either want to or need to have a more face-to-face experience still have that, and therefore it improves the airline experience in that they can focus just on those people who really need or want that more personalized experience. It improves security. Today, most of the security measures, while some is automated, many is still has the human element and is visual. This takes the human error out of that and is shown to be very accurate in terms of identifying, matching the documents versus the person traveling. Airport capacity is a major issue globally. IATA predicts that passenger traffic will double by 2035, up from like 4.4 billion passengers now to roughly around 8 billion passengers. And so airports either have to choose to add on terminals, which is very expensive construction, or they look for technology to be able to process more passengers in the facilities they have, and this allows that. And you're also able to personalize a journey. You can choose the way you want to go through an airport, rather everyone being forced into one process. This is kind of a very high-level overview of how this would all work. The interesting part is basically you can choose to either enroll at home on a mobile device, or you can actually enroll at the airport. Enrolling in home is a simple process where there is an application that you basically enter in some basic information one time. With the smart passports, you can actually do the near field communications of a phone, and allow it to basically scan the information from your passport. You take a simple selfie from that, and now you have basically your token that is matched between the biometric data that's in your passport and your actual biometric data. On the day of your travel, you do your check-in process through an airline application like you would today, and then basically the application looks for that active boarding pass and then matches it up. So now you have a single token which matches basically your biometrics, your passport, and your boarding pass. So then when you make your journey through the airport, that becomes your token. You no longer need to have and present ID or boarding passes throughout the airport. Basically, that your biometrics is now your token. So whether you do print out a boarding pass or a bag tag, instead of having to pull out the documents, you basically have these biometrically enabled touch points that basically verifies both your biometrics and, how many bags that you've decided to check and so forth. And that is the process through the airport, and significantly speeds up. So it can be bag drop, pre-security, all the way through to boarding. On the opposite end, it also works coming into an airport through automated immigration baggage pickup. So that's near term. And to talk about when this is happening, this is not like in the distant future. This is actually happening today. For Collins Aerospace, we are actually doing the top part of this journey in a trial with Ryanair and EasyJet between Bristol in the United Kingdom and Dublin in Ireland and back and forth. And so this is what's going on. The key component of this is that the solution is not embedded within all the individual touch points. It's basically a cloud-based solution using current generation common use web service interfaces into all of the single touch points. The other key part of this diagram is the fact that you have to make this work. Some of the other trials going on in the industry may be single touch points or single airlines. To make this truly valuable to the industry, you have to be able to do the multiple touch points, but you also have to do the multiple airline DCSs, which is on the right, such as Amadeus and Sabre and Navitaire. You have to have integrations into all these departure control systems to be able to handle all of the airlines within an airport. But on the left side of the diagram, it's also important that the back-end biometric matching databases can be agnostic. It can be in the U.S., the Transportation Security Administration, Department of Homeland Security actually does the matching. In some cases, it's other government systems, or in other cases, you can trial private systems. So that's an overview of how the schematic of the system would work. What questions should the aviation stakeholders should be asking? One, does it improve the passenger experience? If it's not, they have to have a business case or a use case of why are they doing this, not just because it exists out there. Is it going to improve the passenger experience? Will it actually increase throughput in the airport? That is the key decision that a lot of airports are looking at right now. Can it reduce the number of staff at each touch point? In some cases, airlines or other organizations are looking or having resource issues, and that therefore they can do more with less staff, or in other cases it allows them to reposition staff into more important functions. Does it improve security? How does it maximize the use of airport space? You need to make sure that this is airports is very high value space, and making sure that it maximizes the space they have without the need to have to build new terminals or new construction. Can it reduce fines and costs to return illegal passengers? Specifically in parts of the world that if an airline boards passengers who don't have the correct visa or other documentation, they can actually get fined by the government, some pretty significant fines. And so is this a solution that can help them check against those databases, making sure that their passengers have all the documentation and save them money? One of the airlines that we talked to, this is one of their key drivers, is basically to reduce fines. The other issue is, how will multiple countries agree to biometric database management? Since this is a fairly new technology, what often happens in the aviation world is that the technology and the solutions sometimes outpace the industry standards. And so this is one of those cases where the solutions are evolving fast. The governmental and industry organizations such as IATA, ICAO, or so forth are working on potential standards. But we need to make sure that the solutions being put in place are matching the roadmaps that these organizations are looking for. Privacy laws are very important. The European GDPR privacy law, other global privacy concerns, passengers have to feel, one, that the system they are using is in compliance of laws, and two, they have to feel that they have the comfort level in terms of their own data privacy. The solution should be able to, one, you should be able to, if it's not, in some cases, the government will require you have to use this. The case is the CBP exit program in the United States for departing international passengers. They have to use that. In other cases, it can be an opt-in, opt-out, where you can decide whether you have you own the data, whether you keep it in your your phone or your database, and you can either keep it permanently or have it erased at every, each flight you take. The solutions must be able to have those type of flexibility to make sure that they're satisfying international laws as well as travelers' preferences. And then, can an airport have multiple biometric solutions? What is happening in this space right now is that there are a number of vendors trialing different areas. Some airports or some airlines could be having preferred solutions. So we've seen cases where an airport has come to us and said, I have one airline who wants to use this solution in their terminal, and I have another airline who wants to use this solution in another terminal. Are these solutions ability to work together, because they can't have completely siloed independent solutions? It has to be something that works across the airport. These are questions that the stakeholders, whether it's an airline, a government, or an airport, should be asking their vendors. Can you integrate with third-party systems? A perfect example is boarding gates, as you saw, as one of the touch points. These are very expensive systems, so they need to make sure that whatever solution they choose, that biometric solution can integrate in with an existing solution. It's an airport cannot afford to have to rip out, 100 automated boarding gates to basically accommodate a different biometric solution. Two, was your solution built with data privacy in mind? We touched on that on the last slide, how important that data privacy is. If it's not, it's just the risk is too high, both from a traveling point of view and a compliance point of view. Is your solution embedded into the touch points? And the reason we ask that question is, well, if your solution is embedded into the passenger check-in or the bag drop or the other part, then you're actually tied to that solution no matter what you do. And then you have to start worrying about, are your contracts coterminous? If you want to change your biometric solution, does that mean you have to change your check-in solution or vice versa? Or is it a system that is agnostic and kind of sits above the solution and has a simple integration into those solutions? How many airlines do you have integrated? This is very important. As we talked about, it is not overly difficult to do a single trial with a single airline, maybe on one flight, to do a proof of concept. Now, there is value in doing that proof of concept to make sure that the solution as it states work. But if you cannot roll this out across all the airlines within your airport, then it does have very little value, because you cannot have, I have 20 airlines operating my airport, but only 2 of them can use this system. Can you integrate multiple biometric solutions? There is a new term, what we're calling biometric brokers, or biometric integration brokers, that is coming about, that if an airport is forced to have multiple biometric solutions, there has to be an integration layer above that integrates these layers into a common solution. Are you biometric agnostic? Right now, facial recognition is the preferred solution in most places globally, and that's because that is the biometrics that's on the passport chip. However, there are other areas such as iris scan, fingerprints, and even vein scanning that are becoming more prominent, and we are seeing requests within the industry to do this. And can you do the mobile enrollment? While there is the ability to do enrollment at the airport in a specific kiosk, that is fine, and there will always be a need for that. But the problem with that is then you have to enroll every time you go for every trip in the airport, and there's going to be a large number of the traveling public who would like to skip that process, basically enroll once and use many. And so does the solution have that? Obviously, with any technology that, our experience is, you cannot just put a technology into an airport, or an airline cannot just release a technology and expect people to use something brand new. There has to be a passenger engagement strategy where you educate the passengers, and you look for those type of passengers who are willing to try something new and want to try something new. So there's different strategies. Obviously, virtually every airline has their own airline application. So you can basically take the application that we have developed and embed it within the airline application as one way of doing it. So you have pre-enrollment branded. You have to incentivize the fast pass experience. So, this is kind of a different type of experience for their travelers that allow them a more faster and quicker journey through the airport, so they can spend more time, relaxing or browsing within the airport environment. And then finally, I'm looking at their frequent travelers. Obviously, if they have frequent travelers, they're typically more used to different technologies throughout the world, and so targeting the frequent travelers as early adopters is another strategy. So what lessons have we learned? Learning curves will depend on passenger demographics. We have had different, depending on areas, whether it's the different traveling clientele or the different areas of the world in terms of the willingness to look at new technologies and automation technologies, that does have a difference. You must have a realistic use case, from an airport and an airline point of view. Why are you doing this? A perfect example was we looked at one airline that was had a 777, and they were looking at, maybe redeploying some of their gate agents, and they wanted to go from 5 to 3 gate agents using this, and it was very successful. And we're actually able to board a 777 in 30% less time than they did previously with 2 less people. We had another airline who was looking at doing a Boeing 737 and going from 2 gate agents to 0. Well, that's not realistic. You can never remove the gate agents, because once people get confused, they don't know what to do, and queues start. And so it's very important to understand, what is the use case? Why are you trying to implement this technology? Lessons learned: increased throughput should be achieved. As we said, we've had a number of examples where, one, it is a quicker journey through the airport, and we're able to board aircraft much faster than we have before. Typically what the statistics we have seen, the time it takes from a person to walk up to an automated boarding gate, and then it basically takes your biometrics, it sends the biometrics out to the biometrics matching database. For example, the one we were looking at was the TSA. It confirms the match, and then it sends that match to the airline departure control system that allows the gate to open and registers the passenger as boarding. It takes less than 2 seconds to do that process. And so from one passenger going through the gate to the next passenger going through the gate can be around 4 seconds. As I said, you can board larger aircraft in 10 minutes or so, and even some of the double deckers in less than 20 minutes. So it significantly improves the throughput that both airlines and airports are looking through. That is very important for airlines, because obviously turnaround times are very important for them. One, from a fuel burn point of view, the longer a plane sits at a gate or waits to get into a gate before they can depart, it costs them money, as well as the on-time statistics and any potential fines they can be for not being on time. The solutions are not plug and play. This is, I think, one of the most important lessons, and what stakeholders should expect. You can't just put the solution and expect it to work day one. You have to have a dedicated staff for a certain point of time that is making sure is educating the public, is educating their own staff in the best way to use this. There are nuances in terms of airport lighting, in terms of where the cameras are set, in terms of the demographics of where do you put the machines. A perfect example of what we learned was in one trial, we actually put yellow footprints at the base of an automated boarding gate, and we would take one picture that would send to the matching database. And what would happen would be, people, when they see those yellow footprints, tend to look down at the yellow footprints. And so when the picture was taken, the picture caught the top of a person's head, and then it was rejected when, it was sent to a bit database, because it obviously could not find a match. So what we do now is that we take a multiple set of pictures to make sure that if there's any kind of distraction, that one of those pictures, and we now have, machine learning, artificial intelligence that learns how to detect this is the best actual picture of a face, and it'll send that picture back to the matching database. And so now we're starting to see, for actual people in terms of matching who were correctly in the database, over 98% matching. And the ones that typically are rejected are ones that should be rejected. One, because maybe they're missing travel documentation, or there's something specific that a gate agent needs to talk to that person about. So you should be able to get very high levels of accuracy. Another very important issue is to make sure that the airline headquarters and the local ground staff are aligned in the desire to do this. We have seen cases where potentially the airline headquarters is very excited about doing a trial and implementing this type of solution, but the ground staff had not been notified and were not really on board with it, and you're not going to have the same type of success rate and smooth operation that you would normally have. Significant cost savings are achievable by using this in terms of the operations from both an airport and airline point of view. And then finally, to maximize the value, you really need a complete end-to-end solution. Instead, the trials at a single point like boarding or bag drop are useful, and with one airline are useful, but to truly get the full value from an airport point of view, you really need to have it at every touch point, and also you need to have multiple airlines. That's when you get the true value in terms of increasing your throughput through the airport and customer experience improvement. Okay, so what's next? So what we talked about, everything I talked about is starting to happen today on all the previous slides that you were seeing. Not only we're moving from the single point trials or single airline trials into the multiple touch points, multiple airlines. That is it's being rapidly adopted throughout the globe right now. But there are other areas that this can take on from the future. There can be a lot more personalization of the journey, especially when we start talking about airline lounges. Instead of having to produce documentation when you go into a lounge, basically the staff will recognize you based on your biometrics and certain preferences that you may have if you decide to opt in. There's the ability to start using your biometrics for in-flight payments should you opt in terms of making the credit card readers obsolete, in terms of, passengers while they're sitting in their seat having to fish for a credit card to pay for either onboard duty-free or onboard meals and so forth that biometrics can use there. You can have much more in terms of improving security throughout interconnecting the different government databases. And then off-airport opportunities. One of IATA's big initiatives is called IATA Next, and basically what they're looking at is taking some of the functions that happen in the airport and moving them off airport, such as, we already do check-in off airport, but the ability to do bag drop and other functions off airport. This solution that we're using in airports right now can easily be ported to such areas such as hotels, convention centers, rental car drop-off, where you can use your biometrics to do some of those things that you would typically do to the airport. And so now the airport is a much more seamless journey. And so that's something we're very excited to be part of. That pretty much takes up my time. And so I appreciate listening. Thank you.